Welcome to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast, where we celebrate Minnesota's incredible fiction authors and the stories that make our literary scene so vibrant. I'm Rob Jung.
And I'm Michael MacBride. Together, we're the team behind Bell Cow Productions and the Bell Cow Catalog, a digital catalog designed to connect Minnesota authors with readers, libraries, and indie bookstores.
The catalog will be heading to all 377 Minnesota libraries, 80 plus indie bookstores, plus those in border cities such as Sioux Falls, Fargo, Superior, and La Crosse.
And now with this podcast, we get to bring those amazing voices to life. Every episode features one of our herd members talking about their books, their writing journey, and the stories behind the stories.
And before we start, let us apologize for all the cow-related puns you're about to hear.
All right, let's dig in. Today we are joined by Beth M. James, author from far northern Wisconsin, I believe you said, in a little house in the woods, something like that.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Welcome, Beth. And is this your answer to maybe like the little house on the prairie? The little house in the woods instead? Just wondering.
Yeah, I know.
She did grow up in Wisconsin.
I grew up in Minnesota.
I know you did, but the little house on the prairie author grew up in
Wisconsin. Were in yeah. Yes, so. And my husband and I, we retired up here 4.5 years ago, and we started out in a tiny home. So we were living in a house that was it was about 450 square feet for 4.5 years.
Oh, and then gosh.
This summer we did buy something else that we stayed in the same place, but we got a manufactured home that's a little bit more square footage, since we knew we'd be up here permanently.
So we love it. Where did you write when you were living in the tiny home?
Oh my goodness. They're in the loft, which was the height was 3.5 feet. I would crawl up there, and I had the perfect spot for writing. It was really cozy, but unfortunately it wrecked my knees too, because I wasn't in a regular chair. So that's when I got a she shed and I got an office out there, but it's a little bit cold out there right now. So I'm inside our house.
I went to Elmira, New York, and I saw Mark Twain's house there that's up on this bluff, and it's gorgeous. And he had, I guess, a he shed. It was an octagonal kind of construction that he would go out and write in. So I like that idea of like having your own space that's dedicated to it. That seems like a really cool idea.
Yes, it's I just love it out there. But now for the winter, I'm in the house.
Sure.
When did you start writing fiction?
I started probably when I was about 17 years old, maybe even sooner, but I can't count that because it was terrible writing.
You got to start somewhere, though.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you talk about detail. I was very detailed in my writing, and it's stuff that you just wouldn't want to read. But however, what really got me into writing is when I first started reading chapter books. So that was in 5th grade, maybe. And it's like, I want to write stories like this. And so that's when I started. And then I got the first idea I have a trilogy that's out there. It's The Calling, The Promise of Return, and The Calling's Return. That book I started with first. And it started off of an idea of some guy saying Gelsomina in a movie. And I just loved how he said it. So then I thought, well, okay, I'm going to go with Jessamina. And it just started from there. But it was kind of a complex story. And I didn't know why I started writing it, but everybody kept giving me different ideas on how I should do it. So I stopped writing it, and I wrote Gitana, And Katana was published in 2013. And then after that one was done, then it's like, yep, I know how I'm going to write The Calling, so made it then into a trilogy.
Isn't that funny sometimes how you need to write one book in order to know how to write another book? Like there seems to be like a time and a place where like that book, it's not right for it yet, you know? Um,
Yeah. And on The
You,
Calling, those books, I entered a contest that Michael Anthony Hall, he was the one who hosted it. And because I think they were
wow.
trying to find for film, and I finaled in that one. And so I knew I had a good story. I just had to get it right. And so then that's why I did write Katana first.
you and I followed exactly the same path. I wrote the first book of
Oh,
what I didn't know it was a trilogy at the time, but then put it aside for about 5 years and wrote another book and then went back to the first one and it ended up being a trilogy.
yeah.
So did you know you were writing a trilogy when you started?
No, not at all. No, but I knew it was going to be long because it's the complexity between it's a love triangle and it's from a different world. So it's a woman who wakes from a coma and she has to tell her fiance that she's in love with another man from a different world. And so the whole premise is her trying to prove to him that it was real and him trying to tell her it was just a dream. And so that's what the series is about, it's a series actually.
So
And it's a fun one.
have you seen the TV series Outlander?
Yes. And I wrote this book before Outlander. And I had a lot of people tell me that it's similar to that book or,
Mhm.
to the Outlander series. And I finally I didn't want to read Outlander as I was finishing up the third book. And so I waited and then I did read Outlander and then I watched some of the series and it's like, oh yeah, yeah, there's some similarities in there. So that was cool.
Interesting. Interesting. Obviously, you have touched on a plot line that resonates with a lot of people. Um,
Yeah.
so, so what's your most recent book?
The most recent book is The Orb Lady, and it's a generational story of three women. But this first book, I'm going to write a trilogy on it. I'm working on the second book. This first one that's out is Cali's story. And Cali, she's just coming of age. She's 18 years old. She works in a small town truck stop, and a rich guy ends up taking a liking to her, starts getting obsessed with her, and he hires his traffickers to kidnap her. And so she ends up killing one of the traffickers. So she's on her run. She's on the run. Her mom tells her to run to the Orb Lady. And so here she is. She's on the run. She's got the police after her, and she has the traffickers now after her, trying to find her. And so it's kind of a two-part story of her being chased by the traffickers and trying to, flee from them. But it's also then when she does find the Orb Lady, she discovers that the Orb Lady is her grandma and that they have a gift. And so the other part of the story is her developing her gift.
Hmm,
So
interesting.
what would it spoil it to say what the orb lady is? Like I'm picturing a crystal ball, but I don't know if that's what you had in mind or not. But
No, no, this won't spoil it at all. So the Orb Lady is a lady so Callie's grandma, she reads orbs from photos. And so what she can do is she can rub her thumb across the photo where the orb is, and she can tell the person about the orb, who that person is, who the spirit is, why they're in the picture, what's their story. And so that's her gift. but then it goes on where Cali has a little bit more gift to that, and her mom also has a part of that as her gift.
So
Interesting.
is that part of this autobiographical?
Yeah. I know.
Should we be concerned? You know?
But the interesting part about it is, so I have a newsletter and it's out on my website. And for a gift, I do a short story. And that short story, I have the Orb Lady read one of the orbs. And the orb that she's reading is when I was on a cruise ship a few years back, I took 3 pictures of the sunset, and the middle picture had an orb in it. And that's what I wrote the story about, is that orb. So it's kind of fun. It was a story that, part of a photo that I actually had. But if there is anybody who reads orbs, I have no idea. I made that part up. So
Interesting.
there's some magical realism in that book.
So you write what, romantic adventures, or romance with danger, or how do you describe?
So I write character-driven stories that have elements of romance, crime, and the unexpected.
Okay.
And so I
The
try to get all of
unexpected. I like
those
that.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you run into cross-genre problems with people who can't figure out where to pigeonhole your books?
Yes. Yes, I do. But I am okay with that, because when I just let it out. So basically the story just starts and it just keeps developing. And I don't worry about genre. It's just, this is the story that I want to tell. This is the characters, and I go from there. But you are absolutely right. I have some troubles with that.
I have run into the same thing where, because I tell stories and I'm not particularly concerned about where they're pigeonholed, and
Yeah.
until you try to sell books in a bookstore, and then they
Yes,
figure out where to put your book.
exactly.
I always tell them to put it on the end cap.
Yeah. Put it right there out in the front center, right on display, then you don't have to worry.
Right on the counter where they're checking out, for sure.
You bet.
Hopefully you're good enough so they impulse buy it, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Read a little something out of one of your books for us.
I'm going to read something from The Calling.
Okay. That's the first book in your trilogy.
That's the first book in the trilogy. So I'm going to start right from the beginning of this book. And Walt pressed his forehead against the window as he watched the Chicago sky fade into darkness. The sun disappeared behind the buildings and the temperature dropped into the teens. He could be anywhere in the world. Belize, St. Thomas, Mexico, or even San Diego would do. Anywhere would be better than stuck inside the Billingham Hospital on the loneliest night in the world. 3 months and 17 days had passed since the fire, and his fiancée was still unresponsive. The rhythmic flow of oxygen pumped through the respirator to remind him of life and death. Walt. Helen Arbel's voice brought him back to the present. He lifted his head off the glass, but still couldn't look at his mother. He stared at the floor. She sounded tired and impatient as she shifted in her chair. Her powdery perfume clouded the room. And he wished she'd wear something else. Jessie wouldn't wake knowing Helen was in the room. The chair squeaked when she stood and moved toward him. The click of her heels seemed heavier than usual before she stopped behind him. You waited long enough. You can't ignore the facts. Make a decision. You have responsibilities. His head down, Walt caught the puckered skin coming out of her pale blue pumps as he turned to face her. He loved his mother, truly he did, but the last few weeks she had started to pressure him, and now it continued. Family duties called. He had to get back to work. You sit, you wait. This isn't good for you or her. You stay with her day and night, hoping she'll wait. What if she does? Have you considered the consequences? I get it, Mother, he said and crossed his arms. She had her arms wrapped around her purse. The wrinkles on her usually smooth face showed signs of weariness. At 58, she tried masking her age by wearing a little too much makeup and dyeing her hair jet black. To avoid his mother's closeness, Walt moved away and went to stand by Jessie, whose face was hidden behind tape and tubes. A strand of her blonde hair fell across her cheek. He lifted the curl with his finger and brushed it aside. His mother sighed heavily as she walked to the end of the bed. She smoothed out the red prayer blanket a lady from her church had made for Walt and his fiancée. You heard the specialist. They can't predict what will happen when Jessica wakes. There's no guarantee. Her memory may be gone. She may not be able to walk. You'll have to put her through months of therapy to get her back to normal, if at all. Keeping her on support isn't helping. You're only prolonging the unknown. A new beep sounded, an intrusion. It came from one of the machines near the bed. Jessie's heart rate went up and became a jagged line on the monitor. This had happened numerous times. No one understood why, but he believed it was her way to protest. Stop it, Mother, Walt said, as if his fiancée could hear them talking about her. Carol, the head nurse, rushed into the room and checked the monitor. Walt reached underneath the blanket for Jessie's lifeless hand and squeezed, hoping for a response. They watched the machine until her heart rate went down again and the beeping stopped. Her hand felt cold as he stroked it. Only another hiccup, Carol said as she pressed some buttons. She surveyed the room and frowned, as if aware of the tension in the air between Walt and Mrs. Arbel. The nurse smoothed her hair while she excused herself and left the room. Helen Arbel moved toward the vinyl green chair and collected her fur coat. The two of you have been through enough. Walt cleared his throat, irritated that she had to get her last word in before leaving. I can't stand seeing you this way. You practically live here and it's not good for you. She looked around with pursed lips. The bounty of flowers, roses, carnations, and orchids colored the room but couldn't mask the starkness of her present situation. Even your father agrees with me on this one. Walt rolled his head and stretched his neck muscles. He wished he could reverse the last few months and start over. If only he had convinced Jessie to stay in bed the morning after their engagement party. He should have gotten out of bed and gone jogging with her. Instead, he went back to sleep to coddle his hangover. He should be the one in a coma. Walt tightened his jaw to keep his emotions intact. His heart pounded. Your father returns from Paris tomorrow, his mother said. He will be home for lunch. Please join us. He'd like to see you. I will, Walt told her without thinking. He'd do his father what he wished. Helen's heels clicked against the floor. She gave him a goodbye kiss, patted his shoulder, and then left, alone in the room. Her steps echoed down the hall until she reached the elevator. Walt tucked Jessie's hand underneath the blanket. He paced the room, twisting his back while waving his arms to relieve the stress. He stopped at the window and looked down at the street. The wind picked up and swirled the snow across the road. The weatherman predicted more snow for tomorrow. His mother was right. He couldn't go on like this. Each day he waited for a twitch, a moan, a gasp, but nothing came from her. This wasn't Jessie. It killed him to see her so lifeless. But how could he give up on her? Why did so many people expect him to pull the plug? A tear rolled down his cheek, and Walt wiped it away. Jessie always put others before her. She always reached out to him for a decision. Was he being a coward by not making a decision now? Footsteps shuffled into the room. Hey, how's it going, Walt? Hearing his best friend, Walt straightened. Hello, Sam. His friend worked 2 miles from the hospital and came to visit every day, either during lunch hour or after work. He sympathized with Walt, but he wasn't one to dwell on it. He kept Walt sane through the weeks by keeping their conversation real. Sam glanced at Jessie, motionless and mummified within the blankets. Any change? No, no change. Sam went straight to Jessie and found her hand. He leaned forward. Hey, Jessie, it's Sam. Yes, again. Wake up. He waited. The ocean's calling. At 28 years old and slightly overweight, Sam was single for the third time. He worked too many hours at his law firm. Both wives found other interests less than 2 years after they walked down the aisle. Sam greeted Walt with a fist to the shoulder. He stepped back and frowned. You catch a remote glimpse of yourself lately? No, Walt grunted. I avoid looking into the mirror.
What it made me remember, weirdly enough, was in college. I had a professor challenged us to write a paper about an unusual topic, and I'm a deeply curious person, and so I found the most unusual topic I could come up with at the time, and I ended up going to a place in southeastern Michigan, which is where I was from originally, and they had a building that just held people who were in comas. And it was people who had been in a coma for a long enough time that they were no longer in a hospital, and their families at least had enough money to be able to sustain them there. So it was a floor of just people hooked up to machines or not, and nurses going around checking on them. And it was deeply eerie. But I remember thinking, like, how difficult that must be to have a family member or someone you love in that position, and that struggle. I mean, you capture that really well, like those questions of doubt, and wondering whether you're doing the right thing or not as well, for sure. So, well done.
Yeah, and that's one of the things in the prologue there is that, he has to make that decision and he makes it. And it's one of the worst things that he has to do. But
Yeah,
that, chapter I wanted to give, what it is like for somebody to have to make that decision.
definitely.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
So
And then,
what's next? What's
well, like I said, so the Orb Lady, I'm working on the trilogy or I'm working on the second book of the trilogy for that.
okay.
And the Orb Lady, when I started writing that one, it was about, I was working with the Minnesota Judicial Branch, and we would get these ICE reports with a lot of statistics and, the crime and other events that were going on. And one of the things that really struck me was about human trafficking, the statistics on that and how, I mean, it's right here in Minnesota and Wisconsin,
Yeah, definitely.
all the states. And so I wanted to bring awareness to trafficking. And I thought, well, what better way of writing about it in a book? And it's not a textbook or anything like that. It's just at least bringing some awareness to that, the human or the sex trafficking.
So
Mhm.
the first book is Cali's story. Is the second one then another character in that series, or is it a different generational story? Because you had said it was
It's
kind of a
the next
generational.
generation.
Okay,
So it's Brig's story, which is her mom. It's
gotcha.
going to be her story, but it's going to follow right behind Callie's story.
Okay.
So is the Orb Lady sort of ageless?
No, she is not ageless. So she's the grandma, and that will be my third book. And
Ah,
to tie it all in together. So it kind of gives the past experience of what happened, because Callie's mom, Briggs, she left and she took Callie with her and had nothing to do with her mom because of the gift that they have. So now it's bringing them all together again and, to be in a cohesive family.
Sure.
you
So,
write with a
go ahead.
group? Do you have a critique group that you write with, or do you write on your own in a silo?
I write on my own. However, in my newsletter, I am starting another story. So I play pickleball, and the ladies that I play with said, wouldn't it be great for you to write a story about us? Because we're called the Leisure Ladies. And the reason why we're called the Leisure Ladies is because we are just starting and we don't play with the regular pickleball group. And so they're the ones who gave us that name. So I thought, what fun it would be to actually show somebody how to write a story, how I do it, And so I'm doing that in my newsletter.
Huh.
And I just started doing that. I just went through the characters with and this next one that I have, I'm going to start the beats, the plot to it. So they're seeing everything, even when I change it, all of it. They're going to see it all. So they're having a lot of fun with it.
As a person who loves process, I think that's wonderful. I love getting those little insights into just how people do what they do, you know, and the different versions of things that are thrown away. And I know going back and like seeing authors' archives and seeing like their handwritten notes and different manuscripts and things like that. And you're like, oh, what happened to this? This got cut out. And, you know, even if you look at the To Kill a Mockingbird versus, gosh, what was it? Tell a Watchman. And you know the difference between those two is pretty amazing to kind of study that. So it's got to
Yeah.
be. I imagine your readers and your newsletter really enjoy that. I know I would. So um,
What
Yeah,
is your
but I'm just waiting for that when they say, no, don't do that.
what were
what
you
is
going to say,
your
Rob?
what process do you follow? I mean, do you outline copiously? Do you write from the seat of your pants or somewhere in between?
I would say somewhere in between because I do have an outline because I want to make sure I have the beats there. So I have the proper way of writing this story, the novel, but then I let the character take me too. So there's times where it'll change just because of that, as far as what I have already pre-written. So that's where the pantsing comes in, being a pantser.
Yeah, that's often one of the questions we ask for sure. And actually, at the towards the end of the podcast, we generally wrap this up with kind of these rapid fire lightning round questions. Although honestly, they end up with longer answers, which is more character revealing and interesting anyway. So, I. I
Okay.
I noticed on your bio that you mentioned enjoying breweries in the area, and I didn't know if you had a favorite. I mean, of course, Wisconsin is famous for all kinds of beer, but I was wondering what are your favorites?
Well, my favorite one is no longer in existence. That one was in New Richmond.
Hmm.
Um, but I do have a couple of them that I like elsewhere. There's one in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's
Hmm.
called Bombs Away. That one is a fun one to go to. They have great food. My son, he's in the Air Force. He's in explosive ordnance disposal. And from that group, two EODs, they created this brewery. So that's where the Bombs Away comes from. So it's
That's
really
genius.
cool. It is really cool inside. I do
Yeah.
like that one. And then there's I can't remember now, but there's another one near Santa Fe, or not Santa Fe, but Santa Maria in California, by Vandenberg Air Force Base. There's one there. I mean, I don't know right now if I have a favorite because the one that I did is gone,
Fair.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you say in your web site that you love to travel. What's your favorite place that you've traveled?
Um, I would say probably Germany
Why so?
because I was petrified.
You like
I'd
horror.
never been overseas.
Uh,
Um, so my son was there. He was stationed there in Miesenbach, so at Ramstein. And so we went to visit him. And it was just so cool seeing all the different places and how old everything was. I just love that history.
Yeah.
hmm, okay.
Cool. Um, I'm also curious about food. You know, is there a dish that you're particularly known for or something you enjoy making?
My Italian spaghetti.
Mm. What do you put in
My
it if you don't
husband
mind
loves
sharing
it.
a bit of the recipe?
Not a lot. It's tomato sauce with spices in it, or it's already it comes with some Italian spices in it. I put basil in it. a teeny bit of sugar to break down the acidity. I have hot Italian sausage in it and red peppers.
Oh, I like
Very
it
basic.
already.
Yeah, sounds good.
That's for breakfast.
Yeah. Well, we have had it for breakfast.
Okay. What's the favorite book, your favorite book that you own?
That I own,
Mhm.
I would say if you're talking about fiction, it's Shauna. That's the one by Kathleen E. Woodowis. She's the one who, that's a romance, historical romance. And she was the one who just really got me hooked on books too when I read that book.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite.
Kind of related, but you mentioned those chapter books early on. I'm curious, what were some of the childhood favorites? Um, I'm always interested in like what those things were that hook people initially. So
Now, these books were what we learned to read chapter books from. So I don't even remember what they
oh, okay.
were. It was kind of like a series type thing. Um, but I would say my mom and my sisters were avid readers. So in the hallway in our house, there were just tons of books all over. And I just picked one up, and I just, ooh, I like it. And I started reading. I was probably a little too young to read some of them because they were a little R-rated, but I liked them.
Yeah. That, and I mean, sometimes that helps with the reading, right? You're like, oh, this is maybe I'm not supposed to read this. Makes me want to read it even more. So it's like a
That's
good book
true.
getting banned. It guarantees it's going to be on a bestseller list somewhere.
Yeah. But of
Um,
course, Nancy Drew, those got me hooked. Nancy Drew, Trixie Belden, those are really popular back then. And I loved those books. I read all of them.
Sure.
if there was anybody alive or dead that you could have lunch with, who would it be?
Oh, that is a really good question. I've often thought about it, but I am not sure who it would be. There are so many different people. You know what? I think I do know. It's I don't know if she's my cousin or my aunt, but her name is Ethel Tissue. That's we always called her Ethel Tissue. And she's the one who gave us piano lessons.
Uh,
And she had played in Carnegie Hall. She had a gold
Wow.
harp. Her house was condemned when we took piano lessons. But they let her stay in there because she was like 80 some years old. And so had a little space heater with our winter coats on, taking piano lessons. And in her house, she had a grand piano, a regular piano, a square piano, the gold harp. I mean, all these
Oh my
instruments.
gosh.
Yeah. And of course, back then, when you're like 6 years old, it's like, I don't want to be here. And now it's like, I bet she had a pretty interesting life. So I would like to meet her.
Interesting.
I,
Michael, you got
I was gonna say I like that as kind of a finish one. I like that as an ending, a good note to go out on. Beth, we'll be sure to include your link to your webpage below so people can find your books. But I'm curious, do you have any favorite bookstores nearby or places you have connections with where people can find your books or anything like that?
I do like the library. I Up here, there's not a lot of bookstores. There's a lot of
Sure.
used bookstores, but not a lot of bookstores. Um, but I would say any of them that you can find, just go to a bookstore, give them their support and just love those books. Hudson is a great one, chapter two books. Yeah, I can't name all of them off right now.
That's
Of
okay.
course,
You named a couple.
yeah, Candy bookstore, that's a nice one, but that's the used books. But I mean, it's always nice that everybody's recycling. I love little libraries. A lot of
Yeah.
times I'll put my books in little libraries just you know, especially if I don't see books in there. It's kind of nice for them to just pass them along.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight. It was wonderful to meet you and to hear a bit of your story and to get to know your books a little better as well.
Yes, well, thank you. And I appreciate you having me, and it's been fun. It's nice to meet you.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you have more space now, so your
Yes,
knees are
Yes.
not tortured while you're writing. So
yes,
thanks a lot.
thank you.
Thanks for being part of the bell cow herd. And don't forget, you can see this book and more from Minnesota authors in the Bell Cow catalog, heading to libraries and indie bookstores across Minnesota and beyond.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast. We'll be back next Tuesday with another amazing Minnesota author.